Now, this is something that's really cool. I'm glad that you guys were here when we were winding this. This is the only pickup that we make that does not have a bobbin. If you look carefully, you'll see that the magnet wire is wound directly on the magnet. This is what's on the inside of a lipstick tube pickup. This assembly will get put inside the cover, and that will create the lipstick tube pickup, the famed pickup that was used on Dan Electros and Silvertones and Harmonies, the pickup that was popular from being on guitars used in the Sears catalog and the Montgomery Ward's catalog. And this is how we make our reproductions, just like the old ones. So what we have here are pickups that have been wound. They have a start wire and an end wire, but they don't have any of the cabling that goes into it. So this next part of the factory is where we do hookup or pigtailing, where we take these hair-thin wires and we connect them to the types of leads that you would be able to solder into your own guitar. This is a rhythm pickup for a Telecaster, and it uses our stacked construction, so it's hum canceling, and it'll have 4-conductor wire. So she's tinning the leads, and then she'll connect it in a certain way that it can be wired most likely in series, but it can also be wired in parallel or split or out of phase, which are the wiring options that you have with a 4-conductor humbucker.
And let's talk about 4-conductor wire versus like the old school braided single cable. I know you have more flexibility or options for splitting and things like that, but what about the actual sound of the pickup? Does it change?
Yeah, honestly, I've listened to a pickup with single conductor and 4-conductor, and if it's wired the same way, for instance, in series, to my ears, I can't hear the difference. However, it's all part of the process of making something vintage correct and making it right. And it goes back to what kind of material you use for the bobbins, what kind of magnet wire insulation are you using, what kind of spacer are you using, what kind of winding machine are you making it on, are you using nickel silver for the bottom plate and for the cover, are your steel studs nickel plated. You put that all together and you use single conductor cable, and it's part of a recipe of making a reproduction pickup the right way.
Yeah, and sometimes I think it's a voodoo thing too. Like I had recently ordered a 78 model pickup from you guys, and I remember talking to you about what type of lead I wanted on it, and I wanted the single braided, and you were like, "Are you sure you don't want this? So you have the options?" And I was like, "No," because it was all about the guitar that it was going in, and it just kind of in the back of your mind, if you know it's like got that vintage thing inside there, maybe somehow you think it sounds better.
I have a good friend at a major guitar company, and he tells me that there's people that can hear the difference between a single-ply pickguard and a 3-ply pickguard. I can't, but I don't have the greatest ears in the world. I have pretty good ears, but for those people, there are people that can tell what kind of batteries are in your stomp box or what direction your cable is plugged in, and for those people, you've got to make it absolutely right because they can hear.
They definitely can. Not on a level. I don't think I'll ever be on that level. But
I'm kind of glad I can't hear on that level. Drive me crazy.
I mean, for me personally, I've lost most of my hearing, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So.
This is a wax pot. Those pickups are in a bath of molten paraffin and beeswax. When that top comes down and she turns a lever, she's creating a very powerful vacuum in there. You can see that gauge showing the strength of the vacuum. By potting in a vacuum chamber, what we do is eliminate any air pockets inside the pickup. And you also create a completely isolated, dampened pickup. Air pockets contain oxygen. Oxygen can cause the copper to corrode over time. But the other thing that this does is when the pickup comes out and it's cleaned off, you'll avoid situations where any part of the pickup can resonate, especially under high gain conditions, at a different frequency than any other part of the pickup. That dissonance can create squealing or microphonic feedback. So this is one of the processes that we use to make the pickup playable in high gain conditions without getting the bad kind of feedback, the kind of feedback that makes people put their hands over their ears or makes lead singers shoot you those looks like, hey, get it under control or we're getting a new guitar player.
Right. So now she just pulls them out and...
Pulls them out. The only problem is now they're covered with wax. So you got to get the wax off, and I've visited pickup factories all over the world and seen different methods for getting the wax off. The method that we use is we just take a human being with a lint-free wipe and they just wipe the wax right off the pickup. It's probably the most labor-intensive way of doing it, but it's the best way for keeping as much wax on the inside of the pickup as possible, but not having kind of a waxy mess on the outside of the pickup. So if you want to make a humbucker, the first thing you do is you take a stud side bobbin, you put it face down, and a screw side bobbin, you put it next to each other. Then you take an Alnico magnet. In this case, it's an Alnico 5 magnet.
How can you tell just by looking at it?
I can tell because we paint them different colors. They look exactly alike. The Alnico 5s are painted black, and the Alnico 2s are painted blue. This one has a little black mark on it, so I can tell it's a 5. And notice that it's touching the studs. Now we're going to take a metal spacer and put it on the screw side. When this pickup is eventually flipped over, the screws will make contact with that metal spacer. And then we put a black plastic spacer on the stud side. And eventually the bottom plate will go on, and the bottom plate will be attached with 4 little brass screws. And we do use power screwdrivers to screw the screws down. But other than these screwdrivers, most of the pickup manufacturing process is really a hand process.
Sure, and it's probably good to use that so it's nice and taut.
Exactly, and we can make them very consistent. Now, if this were a vintage humbucker, instead of using a black plastic spacer, we would use a wooden spacer. Let me show you the wooden spacer. This wooden spacer replaces the black plastic spacer on our vintage pickups. Why? Because the old PAF humbuckers used a little chunk of maple. And we make our PAF replicas just like the old ones in every possible way. Now, who's going to see this? You're not going to see this unless you really physically tear your pickup apart. But guess what? Some people tear their pickups apart. And for those people, we want the spacer to be the right shape and the right material, just like the old PAFs. You'll find the wooden spacer in the 59 model, the Seth Lover, the Antiquity, and the Pearly Gates. You'll find the black plastic spacer in all the other humbuckers.
Okay. And here's a question. I mean, this seems kind of, maybe it's a silly question, but talk a little bit about slug side and screw side.
I met Seth Lover when he was alive, and he told me that one of the ideas that came from Gibson's marketing department in the mid-1950s, 1954 and 55, when he was putting the design together, was that Gibson wanted to have an advantage over Fender by having adjustable pole pieces. And so he designed the humbucker to have one side be fixed and the other side to be adjustable so that you can actually kind of fine-tune the string balance by directing the magnetic screw pole pieces up or down and get better string balance that way.
And on occasion, you'll see humbucker pickups that have adjustable pole pieces on either side.
Right. We did a pickup back in the 90s for an artist named Alan Holdsworth that had double adjustable pickups. We do a pickup currently for George Lynch that has double adjustable pickups with regular screws and Allen screws. It just gives you more flexibility, and by using different screws, you're using different amount of iron mass in the pickups, which can affect the tonality. This machine just goes crazy every time I walk past it. It's called the stud loader, and what it does is it takes these nickel-plated steel studs. Now, these are not magnets. These are the humbucker studs, and you dump it into one of these tops. We have different ones for trembuckers, for 7 strings, and for humbuckers. And using a pneumatic process, it will insert all 6 studs or 7 studs into the non-adjustable side of a humbucker. This is one of the many machines that was developed in-house by our own manufacturing engineers and machinists. You can't open up a Pickups R Us catalog and find these kinds of machines for sale. You have to kind of invent them.